A lot of angry buzz today about the NAACP convention resolution condemning what members call rampant racism in the Tea Party. One of those who begs to differ is South Carolina congressional candidate Tim Scott, a Republican and a Tea Party favorite. He will join us in just a second from Charleston, South Carolina. First, though, from Kansas City, where the NAACP convention is still underway, it's Washington Bureau Director Hillary Shelton. Sir, a lot of people in the Tea Party, and you'll hear from Mr. Scott in just a moment, pushing back, saying, wait a minute, maybe there are 5 people at a rally of 5,000. Maybe there are 10 people at a rally who have objectionable signs, who have horrendous and heinous views. But you can't call a movement and paint a broad brush and say, we are racist. We are Americans who are mad about something or protesting something, and don't call us racist. How do you answer that, sir?
Oh, you're speaking to me. I'm
Yes,
sorry, you didn't call my name. Well, they're correct. You can't paint with such a broad brush, nor does the NAACP's resolution. Our resolution points to those racist elements that you just described, quite frankly. In the Tea Party movement, they should be repudiated. Quite frankly, all we're saying is that when you have those kind of problems, when people show up with those types of signs, when those types of messages come out, actually using the N-word to describe the President of the United States, we find that organizations like the Council of Conservative Citizens have taken over one of the 6 segments of the Tea Party movement, that indeed they have to repudiate those very racist elements and call for that change. That's all our resolution calls for.
Mr. Shelton, though, the Tea Party leaders we have spoken to say, well, we do that. We do call them out. They're not welcome here, and we don't need an organization that isn't involved with our movement, that doesn't maybe come to our rallies to tell us what to do when we're doing that.
Well, those particular signals are not just held at those rallies. Those messages are sent out beyond those rallies. When you have people associated with the Tea Party calling Emanuel Cleaver, a representative from Kansas City, Missouri, to the U.S. Congress, the N-word, when they spit on John Lewis, one of the stalwarts of the civil rights movement, who was a U.S. congressman from Atlanta, Georgia, when they actually called Barney Frank, the first openly gay member of the U.S. Congress, the F-word, then we have a problem. They're not just saying that personally, they're saying that to the public at large. That kind of discontent has led to some violent actions. We've had offices like, for instance, Congressman Scott's office from Georgia actually painted with a swastika on the side of it, with those who see themselves as being part of the so-called Tea Party movement. We need to make sure they're very aggressive about ridding themselves of these racist elements, and again, that's what our resolution calls for.
One of the controversies in the last 24 hours has been you've adopted a resolution, the convention has adopted a resolution, but they won't release it publicly until the board of directors approves it. If you're going to say these things, why can't we see the copy of exactly what you want to say as an organization?
It's simply NAACP's standard operating procedure. Our Constitution requires that after resolutions are passed at our national convention, the resolution has to be actually confirmed by the NAACP Board of Directors in the October meeting. It's been part of our policies for the last almost 100 years, as a matter of fact. So there's nothing extraordinary about it. There's no secret. We're happy to share with you what's in the resolution. It's just that the resolution in its full amended context is not shared until the Board of Directors has had an opportunity to actually confirm it.
Mr. Shelton, I want you to stand by. We're having a technical issue with Mr. Scott, so we're going to take a quick break. Hopefully we can work that out during the break, and we'll come back, continue the conversation in just a moment. Let's continue our conversation about the NAACP's resolution condemning racist elements within the Tea Party. We're having a bit of a technical issue, but I want to introduce you to Tim Scott. He's from South Carolina. He's a Republican congressional candidate. He is a Tea Party favorite. As you can see, he's an African-American, and at the moment he's being very patient with us and continuing this conversation on the telephone because of some technical issues. Mr. Scott, we've been having a conversation with Mr. Shelton, who says there are rampant elements of racism within the Tea Party movement. Do you see it that way, sir?
Absolutely not. I would invite him to come out and attend some Tea Party rallies. I've been to more than a dozen of them on the campaign trail. I won the Republican primary nominee with 68% of the vote, where most people who were voting consider themselves a part of the Tea Party movement. And that in and of itself is indicative of the fact that the Tea Party movement is a party movement focused on limited government, fiscal responsibility, and free markets.
So I want to ask you a question, sir, because here's where I see the rub. What is the responsibility of the organizers, and as yourself now, as a Republican nominee for Congress, when you do see there have been some pictures, and I'm going to ask our producers to show some of them, there have been some visuals and some protests at these rallies that I think 99.9% of all Americans would find offensive. Some of them would say they were racist, some of them say they were bigoted. When you have, and I will say that it's Tea Party rallies I've been at, they are very limited and very isolated when it comes to the larger universe of people. What is the responsibility of the leadership of the party when you see something like that? Do you turn them away? Do you take their signs?
I think it's our responsibility as an average American to fight against everything that brings our country down. Ultimately, I think what we need to do is focus on the fact that what the Tea Party has done is brought to the forefront the issues that bring us back to being the strongest country possible. When you have folks on the fringes that show up at rallies, how you respond to those folks is less important, in my opinion, than is what your focus on your issues are. I think we all repudiate racism. We all should repudiate racism and racists. We do not want them a part of the Tea Party movement. I'm a part of the Tea Party movement. We have a number of folks of African Americans who are involved in the Tea Party, and we will continue to be involved because the issues are absolutely necessary to move our country in the right direction.
Mr. Shelton, when you hear Mr. Scott make this case that he's been at these rallies, he is supported by Tea Party movement supporters, and maybe there's one or two or three people there, but it is not rampant, as you suggest. What's your answer?
Well, I'd have to agree with him in many ways, and he's actually agreeing with us. We're actually saying exactly what he's saying, that when these kind of incidents happen at these rallies, that it is up to the Tea Party organizers, those in leadership, to repudiate, to separate themselves from those kinds of people.
But Mr. Scott just did repudiate them. Mr. Scott just did repudiate them.
Yes, he did, and that's exactly what we want to see the other Tea Party leaders do as well. As Mr. Scott's very well aware, there are 6 national Tea Party constructs.
Let Mr. Scott, we had a problem earlier, so let's let Mr. Scott.
It is like saying that the Democratic Party ought to repudiate all members of the Klan that have served as a part of their party. The truth is that each of us have the responsibility of standing up for the core values that we believe in. And
if
ultimately,
they showed up on Capitol Hill,
is standing up for the values that will make our country.
Mr. Shelton, I want to ask you to let Mr. Scott finish, because he could not join the first part of the conversation. So go ahead, Mr. Scott, please continue.
Sure, go right ahead, please.
Certainly. And ultimately, the Tea Party stands on the values of limited government, fiscal responsibility, and free markets. This is a party that helped me win 68% of the vote to earn the Republican nominee. To talk about the Tea Party as a racist group of folks is wrong, and it's just regressive, as Sarah Palin said today.
Mr. Scott, what do you think of the NAACP?
Well, I think the NAACP has been skewing to the left for far too long. Ultimately, we ought to be having a conversation about if we're going to find a way to fix what ails us, we have to talk about the high school dropout rate. We've got to talk about the unemployment rate, and we have to talk about free markets and its impact on the unemployment rate. When we release the free market to do what it does best, we find ourselves in the best position to prosper as a country, to prosper as a community. So I'd love to engage in the conversation around the issues that will undergird our success in the future.
And Mr. Shelton,
this, in my opinion, is a rabbit trail.
A rabbit trail to Mr. Scott. Mr. Shelton, answer the critic who would say the NAACP knows that right now, if you look at the polling data, the intensity is on the Republican side. There's not a lot of intensity among African Americans, and that this was done in a way to motivate African Americans on the left largely to get out and vote this fall.
Well, I can tell you this. This resolution was actually brought forward to our national convention by our Kansas City branch of the NAACP. And we would certainly invite Mr. Scott to join us at a national convention because, quite frankly, every issue he just raised were issues that were discussed in depth at this convention. So we have an awful lot of agreement, and we also agree that when this kind of racist behavior happens at a Tea Party event, that it should be repudiated by its leadership. We support you in taking that position, and it sounds like we agree.
Mr. Scott, I want to give you the last word.
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm not telling the Tea Party leadership to look for the fringes within the crowd in order to get them out, to purge them from the crowd. That is to take the focus from the issues. What we're talking about today is how do we find a way to diffuse the Tea Party movement because it's been impactful and successful at the voters' box. We must continue as Tea Party members to focus our attention on limiting the size of our government, to slow the growth of government, and then to stop the insanity of spending $14 trillion of deficit is absolutely too much by the end of this fiscal year, and to free the private sector to return our economy to prominence.
Mr. Shelton, Mr. Scott, I want to thank you both for your time tonight. I also want to thank both of you for your patience, especially to you, Mr. Scott, for dealing with the technical issue. It is a conversation worth continuing, and we will do so in the next coming days and months between now and the election. Again, please, gentlemen, thank you both. Is big government a roadblock on the path to salvation? One congressional candidate thinks so. We'll listen to what he has to say next.